Pronouns are very important to our identity. We know the trouble Jordan Peterson got himself into when he refused to use the preferred pronouns of his students. I can see that it would be considered offensive if somebody called you a her when you're a him and vice versa. And I suppose if you had taken the trouble to be transgender, you'd be dismayed and upset that people saw through your gender affirming surgery and your attempts to masquerade as a member of the opposite sex. So it wasn't until today, really, that I considered the importance of pronoun, the correct pronoun for God. So we know that people used to thinking of God as he would regard it as blasphemy for anyone to call the Abrahamic God a she. But then, is there any reason at all to call God a he? And it seems that Jews and Muslims adopt a completely different pronoun. We know that Jews call God Hashem, meaning the name, so they don't even bother with a pronoun. They don't call him he or she because they want to avoid anthropomorphism, which is a word that I have come to use a lot recently. So anthropomorphism is infusing God, the Abrahamic God, with human characteristics, such as calling him or her. But we can't help it, and the convention, certainly in Christendom, is to call God a he, because we won't be calling, because nobody has ever called the Abrahamic God a she. And I have always thought that if God was a creation of man, it was probably a creation of a man rather than a woman. But of course, I may be wrong. But the escape from using pronouns for God, or using a very special one, is of a neuter. You see, but you don't want to call God an it, because then you think of animals and inanimate objects. And but anyway, I've cut and pasted the AI information about the correct pronouns for God, and I hope this is informative and helpful to our conception of God, and why it is important not to think of him as in any way being like a man or a woman or human in any way. I have heard an ultra-Orthodox Jew say that the reason why these Christians are not afraid of God is because they think of him as a dying man on a cross. Who could be afraid of a dying man? And because Christians have confused themselves, or allowed themselves to be confused, they are in this terrible tizzy of not properly understanding the nature and purpose of the Abrahamic God that they are supposed to worship. And this, I guess, I find very annoying. It's like you see it's like seeing a crooked picture that you long to straighten, and every time you straighten it, it just springs back into its original crookedness, and you can barely believe your eyes and experience, but there it is. It doesn't seem to be straightenable. You try as hard and as many times as you might, you will find that the picture keeps returning to its original crooked position, and you think, what's wrong with it? Is there a trick being played? Why won't you think, don't people understand English? But these are people you're talking. These people you're talking to, it's their mother tongue, and surely they must understand idolatry because they have adopted the Ten Commandments. But I really do hope somebody will write a book about this. Some academic, some honest and honourable academic, and I hope that they have not become completely extinct. So the more I think of it, the more Orthodox Jewish I become. When I think about how strict ultra-Orthodox rabbis are about the correct conception of God and all their little rules. But I do see now that if you conceive of God incorrectly, then you are not going to think of him. You're not going to feel the right feelings you ought to feel towards a deity that created the universe. And when we think of the Trinity, it becomes so obvious now why we shouldn't think of the deity that created the universe as a dying man on a cross. How absurd is that? And then, but according to the Christian narrative, this is what we're supposed to think, that Jesus is God and his mum was Mary and his mother was either a virgin or managed to trick Joseph into becoming the stepfather of God. It's just too absurd for words, and I hope more people will point out these absurdities in order to make it increasingly clear to Christians that they are part of the problem. They have an absurdist view of God, and because their view of God is so absurd, they actually don't take it seriously, and they do not even have the beginning of wisdom, that is fear of the Lord. And that's why everything is turning out wrong for them. And that's why their president is mad. Or if he's not mad, he's helpless. He's helpless against the overgrown military establishment that George Washington warned them against all those, about 250 years ago. And George Washington was right about so many things, but he is now ignored by Americans who have strange ideas about whose opinion they should value. He should value, there's supposed to be one nation under God, but okay, it was a lie. Or was it a lie from beginning to end? But the thing is, if Americans want to be something else, shouldn't they be well, more transparent in what they say they are. So how can you be one nation under God, believing in the Abrahamic God, who is Unitarian or Trinitarian? They don't want to discuss it. And how can you reconcile all these swirling contradictions without going mad or being turned off course? And to such an extent that I have not been able to find anyone sensible to discuss these matters with. I had hoped there would be people who would almost immediately understand what I'm saying instead of being in denial. So, as beneficiaries of organized religion, Westerners should direct their minds into correctly conceiving of God and finally acknowledge that God cannot be Jesus. The supreme and eternal Abrahamic God who created the universe cannot be Jesus, and his mother cannot be the mother of the Abrahamic God. And to believe in these absurdities must surely induce madness and evil and stupidity and explain, which all explain the insanity of US foreign policy and the depth of and width of its evil. But okay, you have a global hegemon that is evil in this global way. And the question to ask is, can it be stopped? And I'm saying, yes, it could easily be stopped if only there were, well, I was going to say 10 good men. If I could only find 10 good men, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let us just start with one. And I have been doing this for over 10 years. And I have not been able to find anyone sane and honest and reasonable to understand what I'm saying and at least agree with it, even if they do not wish to join me in promoting the solution. And why wouldn't they want to promote the solution? Is there a better one? Not that I know of. And if you know of one, please let me know. But I just don't think there's anything on the horizon. And therefore my idea must be the best around. So why can't I get it considered properly by people I do not regard as moronic, mad, or malicious? This is a question I leave you all to consider.